Hi everybody, Shawn here. Thank you all for listening to What the Bleep Are You Playing? We appreciate you all so much. This episode, we have been trying some new microphones out, and there were a few issues with some of the sound not getting picked up as we had some issues. So, some of it might be a little quieter, and some of the sound maybe even drops out here for a second or two. Did our best to edit around it, and I still think the main points of our podcast still stick in, but you sometimes you live with what happens. So thank you all for listening to this season. It has been a great pleasure to be able to do this, and I look forward to doing it more. So thank you very much. Enjoy.
What the are you playing?
Hello, and welcome to What the Bleep Are You Playing? A podcast where we play a game, many times bad, and tell you why the bleep we played it. I'm Prince Shawn. This is the Sands of Thomas and Mason of Persia, which is in the same way as Jake Gyllenhaal is of Persia. And we played... Prince of Persia, the Sands of Time.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
This will be an interesting episode.
This is gonna be very interesting because the thing that I figured out kind of as we've started doing this is I can gauge by the conversation before we start how interesting or at least how on topic we're gonna be, because before we started this, we pretty much talked about only Prince of Persia before we even started hitting record. And that's how I could tell, ooh, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So at the beginning of when we made a list of what games we were going to play on this podcast. And we went each person picking a game, one by one. And when we got to the end, the last couple, Thomas was wanting to play Street Fighter X Tekken.
Street Fighter Cross Tekken.
Was wanting to play
Tekken Cross Street Fighter doesn't exist.
Yeah, I had to remember which one didn't exist.
We
only played it a few weeks back, but
one of these days.
And Mason, while Crash Bandicoot wasn't, oh my goodness, an amazing game, it was an amazing franchise. So we kind of wanted to end our first season on a high note. And so I decided to break from my top 5 all-time list and bring my number 3 game of all time and make everybody play Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time.
That's right. This was your number 3. I remember that now.
It's one of my all-time favorite games. And so I have probably the most attachment to this game and this franchise. Mason, this was your first playthrough, right?
Very first playthrough. I never even touched a Prince of Persia game ever before this.
And Thomas, had you had any
previous... I've had plenty of Prince of Persia experience. I've never finished any of the games. I got close with several of them, but I never finished any of them. This is the first time I have finished Sands of Time. I played it a shit ton as a kid. This is the first time I have finished it.
Yeah, and so I think I hold in high esteem. Now this game is, we'll get to the reception and everything. This game is incredibly well reviewed. Its lowest review in any of the major publications was a 9.3.
Wow, really?
In the major publications.
Wow.
It had some other ones out there because it's high 80s and over on Metacritic, so it's when it compiles everything. But yeah, in the things that gave awards and big things, it was 9s out of 10s or 4.5 out of 5.
And you brought this up earlier that 2000 this was 2003 when this game came out, which, side comment, was the year I was born, by the way.
So hey,
You're young.
I'm old.
But yeah, we were talking about this earlier, that 2003 was a stacked year.
It was a very stacked
It
year
was.
for games.
And for a game in this, for a game like this, which is the Prince of Persia was a thing before this, but this was sort of the beginning of the Prince of Persia games as we would begin to know them now. For that to be one of the highest in regards to games from that year is pretty impressive.
Sands of Time. Tom's talking about fighting games again. Huh? Sands of Time is the Street Fighter 2 of the Prince of Persia series. It's not the first game, but it might as well be the first.
I can't. Even so, it's the rebooted version of it. 'Cause,
Right.
You know, obviously, Prince of Persia was an IP and it existed on the Apple II, and other Apple products afterwards for a little while.
Right.
But this was, it had been dormant for quite a while. So this was
There was
Ubisoft buying the license, taking a while trying to develop the license, bringing the creator of Prince of Persia on to kind of rework some of the things. And so in 03, when this dropped, there's a lot of people that were like, oh, it's an existing license, it's a big thing, considering that some of the other big games that year, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Soul Calibur 2,
Knights of the Old Republic.
Virtua Fighter 4. So like a lot of these are known IPs as well on it. It's just that this is probably the smallest IP of that group.
Yeah.
The last Prince of Persia game before this, I want to say, was 96 with Prince of Persia 3.
Yeah.
Which I haven't played, but I've heard it's not
good. No. Prince of Persia 2, I think, was the last good one of the originals.
Before Sands
of Time, because it said they were just basically more or less their Pitfall. They are very similar to Pitfall.
Yeah, that's
Very
what I was
similar.
thinking.
You move and you jump. The thing that made it different was the originals was that it had more, like when you jump, you could fall off the cliff a bit and you'd have to pull yourself up. There was different animations of the way. They did a lot of choreography with the game, and that was something that they brought again back to this game.
Yeah.
In the original, it was all rotoscope. In this game, it was all motion capture.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
So this game had a real special place in my heart, and I hold a lot of games in my heart that I beat from my childhood, because there was a while where I wasn't just, either because of time or I was not wanting to really go through games. I didn't beat some of the games that I held fondly. This was a game that I did sit down and entirely beat. So, and no matter how many frustrating moments there were in the last 10 to 15%, and there are a lot.
This is the biggest big difference between Shawn and I. Shawn's first game that he completed was Sands of Time. Mine was
first, but it was
one of the first he completed was Sands of Time. Mine was Ben 10 Protector of Earth. We are not the same.
But yeah, so I always hold those a little bit higher. But I think the thing, and we'll get into this, especially as we get in the end, stories are what stick with me. Unless even stories stick with me, because my favorite Mario is Yoshi's Island, and that's partly because the story is so interesting.
Yeah.
So I beat that game. So again, holding a space in my heart is games I beat. But
I mean, calling a Mario game story special is like pointing out a stick on the ground and being like, that stick is more special.
Well, this stick was like it was green. See? It's special.
It's special. You ride the Yoshis. The stick is on a Yoshi. So I have a real special place in my heart for this game, and so that's why I picked it. But without further ado, there's a little information on Prince of Persia from the internet.
Because we know the internet never lies.
That's true. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is a 2003 action-adventure video game developed by Ubisoft and published by Ubisoft. Oh, so developed by Ubisoft Montreal. Yeah, it's Canadian.
And once again, same year I was born. Just want to remind everyone so that you can all feel old again.
Was 2 months old when it came out, and
It was a March release.
It was released on the Game Boy Advance, the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, the Xbox, and the Windows, Microsoft Windows. The PlayStation 2, Game Boy, and Xbox are the ones that have the unbelievable reviews. The worst reviews are on the Windows. Well, not the worst reviews, but lower reviews are on Windows, but still good. And the Game Boy Advance, while not bad reviews, are more mid-70s because, of course it is, because ports of games on the Game Boy Advance that relied on graphics, weren't as good.
I was going to say, like, it would have, like, the idea of Sands of Time on the Game Boy Advance, it would have to be severely gimped. It would have to be severely gimped.
I haven't played it, but I have to imagine it's similar to the originals, maybe?
Yeah, I think a little bit.
Maybe,
they probably do.
but I don't know.
It's not Assassin's Creed on the DS or Game Boy Advance. Those are much worse. But
I forgot about those.
Yeah, so it had those released.
They did too.
It's not like Arkham Blackgate.
No.
Remember that? No, you don't, you liar.
The game follows an unnamed prince whose father sacks an ancient city at the instigation of a traitorous vizier.
This means taking over.
Vizier.
But
I can pronounce.
Vizier.
Sorry,
sacking
I'm
meaning
white and I
taking
can't
over,
say
by the
things.
way. I don't want anyone else to get that twisted.
It's basically this Aladdin-looking motherfucker is our hero.
Yes, it is. It is very, but also something that's interesting about it is it takes kind of the characters you would think from Aladdin and kind of puts them a little bit in different positions. That the leader is not really a good person. The vizier's still bad, but the princess is actually now a prince, and the street rat is the woman.
Oh.
I mean, she's a princess,
I was
but
gonna say she's not really a street.
but if you put it in those roles, that's kind of what she would be. During the attack, the prince obtains an artifact called the Dagger of Time, while his father's army captures an hourglass containing the mysterious Sands of Time. Visiting the palace of the Sultan and Azad to present the sands as a gift, the vizier tricks the prince into releasing the sands, transforming the people of Azad into savage monsters under his control. Together with Farah, a young princess who knows the power of the sands, the prince works to correct his mistakes and foil the vizier's evil plans.
Why is it always the vizier?
Because viziers are just evil.
Why are? Why is that like? Is that like part of the screening process for royal viziers? You're like, all right, have you done anything evil lately? You have. All right, you got the job.
It's Starscream syndrome. They're second in command, but not the prince or whatever. So it's
They want power.
Oh yeah, they want power. It's like in White House Down when the vice president turns out to be the bad guy.
Vice president's the bad guy in White House Down. I've never seen White House Down.
The vice president is the bad guy in White House Down.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry to spoil this 2013 movie that no one fucking saw because everyone went and saw Olympus Has Fallen.
I was gonna say, were there?
Because there were two movies about the White House being attacked at the same goddamn time, and everyone went and saw Olympus Has Fallen, not White House Down.
Concept work began in spring of 2001 after Ubisoft acquired the Prince of Persia catalog. Jordan Mechner, the creator of the original, was brought on production beginning in June of that year. After the initial story draft was scrapped, as it was too complex, the team began with 4 guiding concepts, including the ability to rewind time, which grew into the Daggers of Time. Mechner's script drew inspiration from this is going to be a very non-white word, Shawn May, with the main focus on creating a simple narrative that worked with the pace of gameplay. The game used Ubisoft's Jade engine, which was originally designed for Beyond Good and Evil, which was another game published by the company. Production was troubled, with the team facing problems with the engine structure and delays with the environment assets, while also managing to create an effective tester network to seek out the game's bugs. In 2004, a version for mobile phones was also developed and published in North America by Gameloft.
Oh, yikes. Oh, that sounds awful. Mobile phone version of Sands of Time made for 2004 phones by Gameloft.
Yeah. So you can see kind of like what we talked about with Wrath of Cortex, that sometimes studios get in the way and development studios have a lot of hell.
Yeah.
And sometimes they make Wrath of Cortex when doing that. And sometimes they make Prince of Persia.
Sometimes they make Sands of Time. It really is a coin toss, isn't it?
It's one or the other. It's never in between.
But yeah, they had troubles. They scrapped ideas, and they reworked back to a very simplistic plot with just basically puzzles, acrobat, and time travel. And you know what? Later games would try to be a lot more complex, and what makes the game is its simplicity in everything. Not to say it's a simple game. No, it is a challenging game in a lot of parts. But
we'll get to that.
But it is absolutely a simple idea. There's not a lot of excess in it. There's not a lot of loose hanging extra plot threads. It's a very simple idea. And the thing that makes the story in a lot of ways for me is that at its bare bones, it's a horror game. It is absolutely a horror game.
Yeah.
You are trapped in a castle where everyone is turned into a monster you're trying to survive.
When you put it like that, it does kind of sound Resident Evil-y.
Mm-hmm.
It also doesn't help that at several points the prince is like, I've had to fucking kill everyone I know and love. Yeah, I'm not in the best mood.
Yeah, one of the bosses is your own father.
I think that's the first boss.
I think that is the first boss. It's either the first or the second. It's one of the very early bosses. But yeah, and watching people be turned basically into not even quite zombies, just like monsters, but no response, and then having to kill them as he's going through this.
And they don't come back.
Well, so shall we get to the ending here? We'll get to the ending already, or we're just talking about the story right now?
Do we want to get to the ending already?
We can hold that off. We can hold that off.
No, we can bounce around. It's no problem. So, to answer your question, the prince puts everything back to right in the end.
Because, sorry, I'm just kind of stealing Shawn's thunder because he's the one who's really passionate about this story. At the end of the game, Farah, the prince's love interest, they have fallen in love at this point.
As you do.
There's still a lot left in the game. She dies.
Jesus.
She sacrifices herself so that the prince can get the dagger.
Mm-hmm.
And so the prince properly pissed the fuck off. Because earlier on in the game, she wanted him to stab the dagger into the hourglass, but he didn't want to because he didn't trust her.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's lost everything. He has lost family. He has lost the love of his life. Everything is just collapsed around him. And he has nothing left. So he's like, well, fuck it. And he stabs the hourglass.
Full send.
And that takes everything back to the beginning of the game.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So basically erases everything that happened. So it's one of those that is, you if done poorly, you'd be like, well, what was the point?
Right.
But the game very much focuses on the growth of the prince and how he goes from a spoiled brat to an actual hero in the end. And so that's where it's like, yeah, this is big because the beginning prince wouldn't do this.
It does kind of remind me of the ending of Days of Future Past, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me a lot about that, where everything gets reset back to normal-ish, but it's something is still gained.
The people who went through it did, or specifically the prince in this, who went through it, had to grow to be able to get to it. It's very much, it's not about the journey, or it's not about the result, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
And it also helps that the prince gets the raw end of the deal at the end. Because he's the only one who remembers everything. So that means Farah, the love of his life, doesn't know who the hell he is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the end of Infinity War with Gamora and Star-Lord. Sorry, Endgame. Sorry, Endgame. I meant Endgame.
Let's say the end of Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Let's just spoil every ending of everything. That's the podcast now.
We're gonna have to slap a massive spoiler warning. Not even for the game, but for just
for everything.
Hey, by the way, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
Rosebud's the sled.
What else can we?
Snape
Bruce Willis is dead.
Snape kills Dumbledore.
Wait, Snape kills Dumbledore? I'm kidding.
Well, that's a section.
Yeah, but it does lead to probably my favorite bit of the entire story. Non-comedic bit, I will admit. Not probably my favorite bit in general. Where the prince kisses Farah, but because it's... Because he tells her the whole story, and she's like, you must think I'm an idiot, because I don't believe any of that. He goes to kiss her, she smacks him, she's like, what the hell am I doing? Because again, she doesn't remember. So the prince uses the last bit of the dagger to reverse time. And then, before he kisses her, and just goes, yeah, it was just a silly story. And he just gives her the dagger.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Again, the prince gets his heart emotionally dick kicked in this story.
Yeah, yeesh.
And that's the thing through a lot of this. This game really is a story-driven game, and the story is the central plot. And I think that's probably why I really care about this game, is because I am more about the story in my games than a lot of other things. And this is where it's very different in any of the games we've covered on this podcast, because I don't think we've really spent much time on any of the stories on any of the games at this point.
What do you mean? I was pretty invested in Beatdown Fists of Vengeance.
I think the most we spent on the story was Larry Boy and the Bad Apple.
That or Ben 10.
Probably, and that was because we were more obsessed with the shit surrounding it
Yeah.
than the actual narrative.
This is definitely a little bit of a different thing, but the story is what invested me in. But that's not to say that the gameplay is bad, or to say that it's not a game that has really strong gameplay. It has challenging gameplay, which, hey, let's get into that. But it is.
Before we do, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
One last bit of the story I absolutely adore is actually the last.
Mhm.
Because the Farah, because you might wonder, well, why is the prince nameless? Why is he just the prince? Because it leads to this great line. Farah is the princess, and she said, I forget what the actual word is, like Kamadon or something like that. Because she said, when I was a little girl, my mother told me, whenever I was in trouble, say the word Kamadon, and a door will appear that I can walk into to be free. And the prince is like, that's stupid. And she's like, well, it works, bitch. And they kind of argue about it because lovers quarrel.
Right.
But at the end of the game, she's like, again, after he goes, you're right, it was just a story, hands her the dagger. He's about to leave, and she goes, wait, I didn't even know your name. And he goes, call me Kamadon. And he leaves. And I'm just like, God damn, that is some good writing.
Wow.
Like, that is some good ass writing.
It's very well written, and it's a very good structure of a story. So, but the story is also played through with the gameplay. With the game, they did a lot of story points are happening while you're playing. You're running across walls. The prince will maybe talking to Farah, or things that they did a lot of stuff. Now, this is one of my complaints in the year 2023 about that. Subtitles, please.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there are no subtitles in this game, and I missed a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, this game really hates deaf people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
and really funny dialogue too. Like one of my favorite funny bits is Farah is skinny enough that she can go through these cracks in the wall, and the prince is not, obviously, because Farah is not a warrior. She's a princess. She's a diplomat. So kind of throughout the whole game, she's learning how to fight, whereas the prince is a great combatant. He's the best combatant there is, but he's also a bit of a shithead. So, and but she can fit through these cracks, and she's like, "There's a crack in the wall. I'll go through it." And the prince is like, "Wait. Let's just see how the hallway is. Maybe you won't have to." He looks down the hallway, traps lined to the wall, like swing pendulums, spinning spikes, whatever. And he's like, "All right, you can go through the crack."
Yeah, that's great dialogue. Honestly, again, this game is really well written.
Very well.
It's very well written, but they did a lot of story points while the game was going on, but also the action and the combat is a story point. Traversing gaps, climbing walls, running around things, and reversing time and doing it is all integral to the story that they're telling. So when you, so much so that like when you die, because the prince is telling the story from the beginning, and he's telling it to Farah. At the beginning, he'll be like, no, that's not how it went.
That's funny.
Oh, like it's all integral to the story, which is where when they built it down to simplicity, it's all there. You learn moves as the story goes on. You're solving puzzles, so there's normal platformy stuff.
I like to think that when you die repeatedly in one place, the prince just keeps going, and then I died. Wait, no, that's not how it went. And then I died. No, wait, that's not how it went. Well, and then I died.
It's where a lot of it, because they're trying to tell the story on it, it's why the reversing time is really cool, especially from a puzzle-solving idea. Is like you can actually trial and error things without worrying about dying at times.
It is a bit of a gimmick, but it's a gimmick that really works.
Modern gaming that have such a big problem. Modern gaming has such a big problem with
what? Just
rating.
One problem?
One of many. Let's say that. It has such a big problem with integrating story into its gameplay. Because nowadays it's
unskippable.
It's either unskippable cutscenes or shit where you just have to walk for like 5 minutes
while people talk.
And that's never fun. Stop fucking doing it. You're not going to. Stop it. This is how you do it. The dialogue going on is important, but you're still doing puzzles. You're still platforming. Still doing. I think that's what makes this game such a good narrative experience.
Yeah, and there are some gameplay things that we can definitely hit on that are problems. The camera.
Oh, jeez.
It's not a awful camera, but it is definitely a early 2000s platform camera. And they actually do start fixing the camera in the sequels a bit, and you actually see the camera that they fully get to when you play Assassin's Creed. Because they do play off of this same stuff that they built into these Prince of Persia games into the Assassin's Creed game, and they're very, very similar. While the combat is different, a lot of the mechanics are very similar to the games, and so it took them a while to finally kind of figure out as cameras were being developed. And this camera, while can be really good for some cinematic moments, especially like you're running along the side of the walls, and it'll change to the perspective of watching there. You're running up, you'll see the camera change, so you can watch yourself doing these tricks. Can sometimes be
disorientating.
And frustrating, and it moves sometimes too much. And while you do have some control over the camera, it isn't enough to really make you feel like you're actually in control of it.
There's specifically this puzzle near the end of the game where I hate these puzzles in any game. This is not a complaint about Prince of Persia specifically, but any game. There's puzzles where you have to go into one door, then go into another, but there's like 8 doors, and it's basically random. I mean, there is a specific one, but it's a pain in the ass to decipher because there's no discernation.
They don't really, they never hold your hand in this game. Aside from like little telling you what buttons to hit at the beginning, they very rarely hold your hand. They're like, here's a room, go figure out what you need to do.
And every time I would get teleported back to the beginning, because you go into the wrong door, you get teleported back. I would walk in, and because the camera would change, the prince would be like, "Oh, I forgot my keys," and walk out. And I'm like, "Son of a bitch, prince! You don't have keys. This is ancient Persia."
This really all goes down for me to my basic point with this game is that it's a really great game that I am bad at, because I feel like gamers that grew up during the like either the N64, PS1 era, or like the PS2 or the Xbox era were just built different.
Yeah.
Because for me, it is very difficult for me to play anything pre PS3 360 Wii era. It's just so much. It's so different to go even that. It's not even like that far back. Like the PS2 era, the PS2 Xbox era wasn't that long ago.
This game will turn 20 years old in a month and a half.
Well, I mean, but 20 years.
For that.
20 years still isn't really that long in the long run. So, but the jump in the change in difficulty from like PS1 to PS2 to PS3 era is just wild.
I think
PS1 era is getting kicked in the balls with a steel-toed boot. PS2 is just getting kicked in the balls. PS3 is actually getting picked up.
And that can come when we get to our important questions a bit on this, because some of it is just how it aged and what you are used to when playing that sort of game back in that day. If you were used to playing platform games, there were a lot of games that had these sort of exact same problems. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm used to this, but you're not necessarily used to those things or these level of not necessarily level of difficulty, because obviously there are hard games now, but that were that type of difficulty.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say, like, this is my kind of game because I love this kind of platform. I love this acrobatic wall running, swinging around on poles. I love this kind of platform, and Prince of Persia is the master.
And the thing that was really cool is they did do a lot of mocap work with actual gymnasts and acrobats to do a lot of the stunts and make them look as real as possible as you could, especially at the time.
It does feel very
and
real.
While some of the like facial stuff and things like that, graphics haven't aged amazingly, and definitely when they're trying to do any dialogue, oof. But the actual gameplay graphics are really good still, and they held up really well.
I will say, the facial animations aren't fantastic, but they get the job. Like, again, the scene where Farah dies, the prince's facial expressions are really good. I will also say, it is cool that they mocap some stuff. However, the mocap does lead to probably my biggest problem with this game, and that's the combat.
I'm ready to fight.
Oh boy. In this corner, get ready for a what the bleep smackdown here.
Because I'm just going to say right now, this might be my favorite non-RPG combat ever.
Oh,
And I'm going
boy.
to say, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Thomas, your rebuttal.
I just don't think it's that great. It's not terrible. Like, I appreciate what it's trying to do. I appreciate that it's trying to be very acrobatic. I appreciate that it's trying to be very going to the prince's sensibilities. It wouldn't make sense for the prince to be, taking 17 sword slices to the chest and then just rubbing it off. No. It makes sense that he's very acrobatic. It makes sense that he's doing all this stunt shit. However, my problem is actually, this may seem like a nitpick, but it really did affect my enjoyment. At a certain point in the game, every combat encounter goes into.
That is actually a fair. I will not really disagree 100% on that. I think this probably can be attributed to some of the production problems that they had and some of the time constraints. At about 60% of the game, the villains don't really change. They just kind of get more armor, or they get harder to kill. They block a little bit more. They kind of ran out of villain bad guy variations and just were like, well, this one now, you can't jump over this one, or well, you can't. This one blocks more. Instead of like upping the combat at times. Now, saying that, I love this combat because of kind of the exact reason that Thomas hates it.
Wow.
The acrobatic nature it allows for so much fluidity and allows me to really improvise, and I never, unlike in a lot of games, and this may just go down to the difference between Thomas and I in game playing and how we play games a little bit, and maybe this kind of goes to Thomas's fighting game background a little bit, because I don't like to block. So when they changed this combat in Assassin's Creed to block and counter, I'm not as good at that.
Right.
But you know what I am good at? Jumping over a dude and slicing him in the back. Jumping off of a wall and stabbing a person. Using my sand dagger to freeze a person, kill this person, come around flipping up and killing a person.
Right.
I'm actually good at this combat because it feels very fluid and natural to me because I don't block.
I did really like kind of how fluid and acrobatic it was. It kind of reminded me a bit of the Batman Arkham games and the way that they do combat.
Mm-hmm.
And the only issue that I had with the combat is that I wish it did do the thing that that the Arkham games did, where you with like a push of a button you go seamlessly from like one enemy to another.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this one you do kind of have to aim which direction you're fighting.
Does lead to something I have harped on in many games so far.
Oh, here it is.
Where's the
Say the
goddamn
words.
lock on?
Say it. Say it, Shawn. Say it.
To have lock on.
There it is.
Like it's not.
It's not as bad in this game.
It's not as bad in this game, but
Yeah.
absolutely, especially when you get flying enemies in, or enemies that are in just corners that you don't realize that you need to, and things like that. Just being able to hit a button and lock on is so helpful. And I think that's the one thing that could have actually made some of the combat even more fluid. I think they just wanted kind of this free feeling. But if you could lock on, I think the combat would have been. I would go from not just my favorite to I think this combat is perfect.
That's fair.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, for me, again, this combat is not bad, but I think the sequels actually do it better. At least the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Warrior Within, in my opinion, has a lot better combat because it does the fluidity thing, but it does it in a better way. Because
Warrior Within also has a better camera, and that helps a lot actually in the combat. There are a lot of flaws with Warrior Within, a lot of flaws, but it actually does fix camera, and I do like the combat quite a bit in Warrior Within. So I don't disagree, Thomas, necessarily. I think I probably would prefer to play because Sands of Time's combat I'm more used to. But I do really like Warrior Within's combat.
I mean, if we're talking game, just entire game, Sands of Time kicks Warriors Within, that's day in and day out. But in terms of just sheer combat, I think Warrior Within does beat it. We might have to do an episode of Warrior.
I think it really will, because when we get to here a little bit about to talk about the reception, we'll talk about all this and how this game was received and how Ubisoft was like, well, this game was not received particularly well in terms of sales. What can we do to make the sales? I know, we need to make this like Shadow the Hedgehog.
Dude, it is genuinely like Prince of the Hedgehog. Like, that is what it is. The intro might as well have, can you see all of me walk into my mystery?
Prince of Persia Unleashed.
Or, it is legitimately surprising they just didn't hand the prince a machine gun in Warrior Within.
Okay, look. The prince does get a lot of changes in this game. He does. And at the end of the game, he is a very different person. I cannot, for the life of me, see him being the person who in Warrior Within gets a cut on his eye and goes, you bitch.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
That is not the prince.
Their answer was, what if we made it an M-rated game and we added rock music and now instead of sand, we make it blood?
Is there a scene in the opening cutscene where you see the princess like kneeling over and falling over, becoming weak as you see the prince standing over her, like in the Shadow the Hedgehog opener?
No, but you do get a very gratuitous shot of a woman pirate's ass.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
they overcorrect in terms of maturity very much.
Yeah, the Warrior. I know we should probably get back to talking about the Sand of Time, but Warrior Within is like, it is the most 2000s game that's ever 2000. Like,
wow.
Genuinely, imagine if Shadow the Hedgehog just had Rouge the Bat in like a skimpy ass outfit. That's what Warrior Within.
Well, in a lot of ways, this actually does apply to Sands of Time. Simply was Sands of Time is kind of a style of game or a way game stories are told, the way things are of the past in a lot of ways. An older style of game that we just hadn't seen as much. Obviously the graphics were great for the time. Everything combat and all of the stuff were new, but like the way they told the story, the way they did things, very much feels like an old time arcade type game that you would sit down and play. And so when the reception isn't there, what do you do? The exact opposite. You go, oh, let's find everything that makes what do the mainstream kids like?
Yeah, and
how do you do, fellow kids?
And remember when we said that this game is good because of its simplistic story, and not simplistic as in bad, simple as in just it's very basic to understand.
Mm-hmm.
The second game opens up with the prince talking to like this wizard dude, and it's like, I reversed the sands of time. So what's going on? Oh, a living time paradox is trying to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
This basically sounds like a Prince of Persia game if it was written and directed by Michael Bay.
It's closer to that than you might actually realize.
Okay, yeah, because like I said, not only is it the gratuitous woman ass shot, but the first time you drink water, because to heal in this game you drink water,
mm-hmm.
which
is a really cool. It's a really cool, interesting, because there's a lot of places with water in the game that and it's like, oh yeah, that's actually a really cool mechanic to heal. It's like, yeah, if you're tired from all the things, what might help you a lot? Water.
Yeah, even though part of me finds it a pain in the ass, but part of me does get why they do it, where you have to hold the button to just keep drinking to get to full health.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, because I'm not great at the combat in this game, I do have to like just hold the button for like 5 seconds, and the prince is just lapping it up like a dog. But again, Warrior Within, I'm sorry, I just genuinely, that game has a rent-free spot in my head for some reason, like every edgy 2000s game. The first time you take a drink of water, this just, again, first time you take a drink of water in Prince of Persia, it's like dun, 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 dun.
It's a very, very Arabic music.
Yeah,
right,
very Arabic, very Persian.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In Warrior Within, it starts that and then immediately goes to this hard ass like 2005 metalish shit.
Oh yeah, the game has so much like rock and punk and metal in it. And it is so fun.
And I mean, like, do not get me wrong. Did I lose my shit? Yes. But
so, since we've talked a little bit about Warrior Within here, let's talk about the reception that led to why they did Warrior Within.
Yeah. So why they overcorrected so much.
By the end of 2003, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time had reached 2 million copies. So it had sold a good amount. Some of that though, so its combined sales since release at that time totaled 272,000 for the PS2, 172,000 for the Xbox, and 100,000 for the GameCube. In the first, by December. So it sold a bunch. It was speculated that sales were negatively affected by the concurrent release of Beyond Good and Evil from the same studio.
Oh, wow.
Also, great reviews. Not
does not equal great sales.
Yeah, and it actually sold worse than this game.
Wow.
Beyond Good and Evil bombed.
In response to this, Ubisoft offered copies of their other games free with purchases of Sands of Time.
Oh, shit.
That game was Splinter Cell.
Wow.
They're like, hey, we know this game is really popular. Please buy our Game of the Year game, and you get a free Splinter Cell with it.
And to be fair, Splinter Cell's good, but also, like, if I'm buying Prince of Persia, you know what else I don't want? Yeah. Oh, boy, I love this story about this epic not medieval, but, like, this epic fantasy journey of the prince's development. What else do I want? Oh, the spy story about stopping World War III. The modern spy story about stopping World War III.
And then they kept re-releasing and repackaging Prince of Persia with new Game of the Year editions and different things, and just say, like, not even maybe that different. It was just different packaging. And eventually it did boost the sales. It got them up enough. I think I saw, let me see if it's on here. If it's not, I saw somewhere.
You know what I think of when I think Game of the Year edition? I think of that one packaging for, I think it was Arkham City Game of the Year edition, where it just had all the quotes in red covering the package. That's like ugly.
I did have that version of the game. I don't like
funny.
that cover.
No, it's a really bad
awful.
cover.
It's awful.
You know what? The Prince of Persia repackaging did work though, because I remember I think we had 2 copies. I think we had the original, and then, or maybe it was our neighbor, because we hung out with our neighbors a lot. Our neighbors might have had the Game of the Year edition.
I jumped on the Game of the Year edition because I'd watched a couple of review shows on G4. X-Play's review, and I was like, this game looks pretty cool.
The original G4.
Yeah, so when we're talking,
Rest in peace twice.
Yeah.
So we're talking, I didn't jump on until Game of the Year edition. Now I did get it, before the end of 2003, but like we're talking a game that I didn't even play till later on, and it's one of my favorites. So like it went over. I did not catch it at that time. It did get enough sales. It sold by 2006. I think they said it was over. It was over like $5 or $6 million sales. So like it got to its point where it sold enough that they're like, okay, we can make a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
But because of these sales and all the things we had to do, you need to make this sequel appeal to the youths. And guess what? Warrior Within sold worse.
Did it really? Ouch. Wow.
Well, part of that is because it was M-rated.
It's M-rated, so they took out a bunch of the audience. Mm-hmm. It also did not get the good reviews, so they couldn't repackage it. So guess what they would do with it? They would sell it with Sands of Time.
Wow.
Edition.
What a cop-out.
Warrior Within, and again, Warrior Within did eventually sell enough that they did complete the trilogy, Two Thrones, which was a better reviewed game. Now, talk about wonky combat. That's probably my least favorite combat of them, because they literally, Two Thrones, because the prince is now merged with the Dark Prince.
Who's the living time paradox.
Yeah, so you can go back and forth between the two of them, and the Dark Prince has kind of like a whip thing. Like, and the combat's not as good in that game, but
a lighthearted character with a dark alter ego he can turn into.
So, because of the reception, this franchise that legitimately was built here on simplicity and doing something, kind of different, became kind of just the same of what there, and then it would eventually kind of spawn into the Assassin's Creed games.
Also, fun fact, if you swap the first letters of Wonky Combat, you get Conky Wombat. Anyways, keep going.
Yeah, Mason Hero.
The original name for Crash Bandicoot. No kidding.
Conky Wombat.
He was originally going to be Willy Wombat. The Two Thrones was not the last Prince of Persia game.
I was about to ask that when you first brought up
it a couple of times, but that is the end of that trilogy.
So when was the last Prince of Persia game?
2010.
Mm-hmm.
Sheesh. So it's been 13 years?
It's been almost 13.
Yikes.
Because in 2008 they rebooted with with one just called Prince of Persia. I didn't like it.
No.
Ouch.
No.
It tries to do things different, but it just didn't work.
And
as
also,
well.
I don't like the art style. It's not like it's not bad animation. It's not bad art. I just didn't really like the art style. They kind of it's not cartoony, but they definitely more cartoonified the prince's face.
They kind of went cel shaded, but
A
not
little bit.
not great cel shading.
Mhm.
Because again, the cel shading is almost exclusively the prince's face. It's weird,
Oh,
especially because his face is covered for most of the goddamn game.
Yeah, it was not a pretty game either. So
And then in 2010, to kind of tie in with the movie, we got Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands, which erases Warrior Within and Two Thrones from the timeline and is a direct sequel to Sands of Time.
Wow.
I have never played that game, so I don't know how it is.
I only played a little bit of it, and so I don't have a whole lot of input on it. It is definitely better than the Prince of Persia game, but from what I played, it's pretty comparable to Warrior Within and Two Thrones in terms of quality. So it's not bad, but it's
but no
the
new
magic
metal,
of Sands of Time they never could recapture.
And to be fair, Sands of Time is kind of like
And what not to do a whole comment on Ubisoft as a whole on it. That's kind of Ubisoft as a whole. Is they'll get some lightning and then they will milk it, and they will milk it, and they will milk it, and a lot of times the things they are milking is not as good.
it's
Battlefront.
It's gone sour.
Battlefront.
Battlefront wasn't Ubisoft.
Battlefront was EA.
Yeah.
Oh, that was it.
Okay.
Never mind.
I mean, to be fair, that is valid. That
would be different company, same type of things.
different. Oh yeah, was Ubisoft Sims?
Ubisoft did have the Sims. For a while.
Sims.
Was Ubisoft Sims? I
They
thought that
had
was
it at
EA
least-
too. Oh no,
EA
EA was Sims City.
Yeah, they both have had it at least some of it. I'm pretty sure.
So yeah, they definitely.
I would-
I do remember them bungling the Sims.
This was a direct shot. Me commenting there was a direct shot at Assassin's Creed.
Oh yeah,
Which
they've really
games I
screwed
don't-
over Assassin's
games that I
Creed.
don't think are bad, but you know what? If they had kind of the simplicity or just kind of the thought process of the Sands of Time of less is more, a lot of those games might be better.
No, what are you talking about? More is more. We need to have our 300-hour plus RPG starring Vikings.
We need to make 5 games at the same time. At least one of them will be good, right?
So, not to just digress for a second into Assassin's Creed,
Keep in mind, sorry.
I really love the Assassin's Creed franchise. I do really like a lot of it. I've played 1 through 4. I haven't really played much of the newer ones because those are the ones I don't like because they took away the assassinations and made them numbers based in RPGs. So you can go and assassinate someone, and if your numbers aren't big enough, you don't get the kill.
Which, okay, I get that it's RPG based, but also I just stabbed this motherfucker in the esophagus.
Mhm.
They're dead.
It takes away from what
Any way you
made the
slice
Assassin's Creed. Now I know that I know multiple big Assassin's Creed fans who will hate me for saying that. Anyway,
Hey, Shawn, what's that red dot on your forehead?
Oh, well, my time has come.
And now the end is near. If it means anything, the red dot's gonna appear on my forehead any minute because I do agree with you. Assassin's Creed.
Oh shit, there it is.
All right, Mason, want to join in the fun?
Mason's just simply goes, Assassin's Creed is the greatest franchise in the history of franchises.
I've actually only the only Assassin's Creed I played is a little bit of 4, and I didn't
4 is
even own
good.
it.
So you've played the best one.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
1 through 4 Assassin's Creed, I have problems with them, but I really do enjoy all 4 of the games. My problem actually comes down a lot of times to the story of the games, that the stories are overly complicated just for complicated sake.
Oh, speaking of which, sorry.
Go ahead.
It just did remind me of a comparison between this game and Assassin's Creed 2 that just made me laugh. Sands of Time and Assassin's Creed 2 both end with you beating the shit out of an old man. That just makes me laugh for some reason. Because in this game you fight the Vizier. And to be fair, in this game it makes more sense.
Does he turn into a giant snake?
No.
It is not.
Aw, damn.
In this game, he does use magic, though. He makes a bunch of clones that you fight, which makes more sense than Assassin's Creed 2, where you just have a punch-up with the Pope. That is the final boss of Assassin's Creed 2. You just have a boxing match with the Pope.
I think something that made this game more than its sequels, and then definitely because of Assassin's Creed being its own original thing, is that bringing back Jordan Mechner to work on this game after considering he created the original Prince of Persia back in the day, was actually really a smart move. And he wrote a lot of the story. He worked on a lot of it, and kind of the good things that came from it are because of what he did. And so there's not a lot for us to usually talk today about the developer because it's Ubisoft. So I figured, if we're going to spend time, it's going to be actually on a creator.
I'm going to steal Mason's joke from before the podcast. Them rabbits, guys.
Yeah. Not a whole lot to talk about on it, but Jordan Mechner is interesting in that, he isn't really in the industry that much. He made 4 games.
Wow.
A couple of Prince of Persias, a game called that I cannot remember what it was called, and then he worked on Sands of Time.
Wow.
He also is the only creator, as far as this is according to Wikipedia, so if I'm incorrect, I apologize. The only creator that then would go on to actually write and executive produce the movie based on his work, as he did write and he wrote the first draft and produced the Jake Gyllenhaal movie.
You said that with such pride.
I like that movie.
Tune in what
round 2
to hear us talk eventually about Prince of Persia.
Where you'll get round 2, another fight between Shawn and.
Okay, well let's put this 100% into context. Shawn has a valid reason for disliking the movie. It is kind of a butcher of this game's plot.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, this was kind of my first complete exposure to Prince of Persia, and aside from the obvious whitewashing, I do think Jake Gyllenhaal is a great choice.
Oh yeah, my to sum up quickly, my problem with the movie, it's called Sands of Time, and it doesn't follow the Sands of Time. If they had just called it Prince of Persia, legitimately, I probably would not throw as much hatred towards that movie as I do.
So I would just like to correct you real quick. You said something about how the creator was involved with the movie, right? For the upcoming 2022 Super Mario Brothers movie, Miyamoto is credited as a producer.
Okay, so that fact that I have said will change in a couple of months.
Right.
To date our podcast for the 5th time. In this episode.
Excuse dating our podcast. What?
Well,
like we haven't done that many, many times before.
Oh, many times.
Boy, I can't wait for that Wolverine trailer at the Game Awards.
Before we get to our last 2 questions of the podcast, I did want to just spend a little bit of time talking about this. I mentioned it earlier, but because we talked a lot about the story of this game, the thing that resonates with me, especially for this, is that this game is built on a very strong theme, a theme of growth, a theme of, going from a kid to an adult and making tough decisions. And they sprinkle that theme throughout it's not just the ending, it is throughout the entire game, where you are having to make decisions and different things in puzzles in different ways, and it's setting this up for the ultimate decision of, sacrificing everything. And a lot of the dialogue is the prince throughout it really waffling with this idea of, can I do these sort of things? Especially, even from the beginning when he's forced with killing his own father to save everybody.
Right.
And, or kill his friends, or, kill people he knew. And so I think that theme is really important, and I just really want to highlight it because I don't think the game works as well if they didn't integrate that theme so well throughout the game.
Yeah.
For a game that's generally it's not Looney Tunes or whatever, but this is not like the darkest game in the series.
Yeah, nobody goes, did I just do that? Or nobody says, he's standing right behind me, isn't he?
The MCU-ification.
Whoa, that just happened.
Tune in for the sneak peek of Mason's review of Forspoken 2023. I'm kidding. I know Shawn's actually excited for that game.
To date the podcast, I purchased that game today, and I'm so excited to play it. Anyway, but I think the theme is really, really important because, as you said there, Thomas, the tone of the game is not dark. It is a light tone while dealing with very dark things.
I mean, again, it is a light-toned game, but there's straight up a bit of dialogue where the prince is in a mess hall where he just had to kill a bunch of monsters. And he goes, a couple hours ago, these guys were laughing and chatting, just as any other day. And now I've had to kill them to free them from their misery. It's like, God damn.
Yeah. it is willing to take on difficult subjects, but not in a way where it either belittles them with just silly jokes, or just goes off the deep end of nihilism and woe is me, woe is the world.
Right.
Nothing.
It does strike a nice balance.
It doesn't become Thor: Love and Thunder, but it doesn't become the Warrior Within.
Exactly. But I just really wanted to highlight that because that is kind of the thing that for me makes this game, and especially I wasn't a kid when I played this. I was 16, but as a 16-year-old kid, it's a good message and theme to deal with. Of you're growing up and you're gonna have to make tough decisions, but still be yourself, and learn and grow. And I kind of like that.
First time I played this game, I was 7.
Well,
Wow.
I was 16 when it came. Well, 15 when it came out.
Well,
so.
I should say the first time I saw this game played, I was 7 because I watched my brother play it. In fact, I will be honest. I don't think I completed the game for a very long time. The first game I completed to show how good my parents were was when I was like 14. We talked about games we completed earlier, so it kind of isn't about. Not 14. I think I was actually very young. It was the M-rated Spartan Total Warrior.
Wow.
Huh. Well, Mason, do you have anything else about it before we get to the questions?
Nope. Let's get to them questions.
All right.
Ready.
Alrighty, on this podcast, we like to ask 2 major questions of every game that we play. The first of those, how does this game hold up?
Better than I think better than a lot of games that we've played.
Mm-hmm.
Not really that great in the grand scheme of things.
Obviously, it doesn't hold up nearly as much as Larry Boy and the Bad Apple, but this is a close second.
Or Go Vacation. I just
All
saw
right,
the
I'm
life
sorry,
leave
but,
Sean's
Mason
eyes.
has suddenly been removed from the podcast. And
Thank you. It's been great.
all of his lines are just edited out.
In post, we've just gotten rid of Mason and I've gone through all the old podcasts and just gotten rid of Mason.
Just completely deleted the Go Vacation episode altogether.
Who is Mason? But in all seriousness, this is probably the game that's held the best out of all the ones we've done.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's up there for sure.
I mean, it does have problems. It does have problems, but they're problems that every game in the PS2 era.
Mm-hmm. It's very similar to what we said with SA2.
Yeah. Again,
which would have been 3 years before.
Camera issues. Yeah. That was with every platformer. Again, I don't dig the combat, but Shawn does. And again, they were just.
And that's not even necessarily a hold up. Necessarily,
that's not like a holdover
mm-hmm.
of
the
whole
time
of gaming. It was just like it was their experiments. They were trying to do something experimental with the combat. And for some people, it worked. For some people, the Linkin Park one worked better.
Further proof that this is that was the Michael Bay of.
that really was. Mason's comparison is making more and more sense the more I think about it.
I think the game holds up really well. Obviously, previous things like the camera, it's nowhere near the worst camera we played with, but it is it's definitely got early 2000s issues.
I honestly, we were talking about SA2. I think SA2 does have the worst camera.
I think so. I definitely think so, but
not like by a ton.
But that's also because SA2 was a late 90s developed camera.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it is not a completely fair comparison, but it's around the same time.
I think the things that make it not hold up are just things that weren't noticed, at least for me, that weren't noticed back in the day. You didn't worry about lock-on. Well, that's now a thing, so that game doesn't hold up as well because lock-on is just an important thing. Games did not have subtitles. I am an old man that needs subtitles, and so that doesn't hold up well because I can't pick up the story as easily because I'm deaf and can't. Yeah, right. So these things that don't
Tell
hold
me
up,
more,
I think.
Gramps.
Exactly. Back in my day.
Tell me more.
I can't hear very well.
Is this hearing attuned?
Oh goodness gracious! But those are the things that is why it doesn't hold up necessarily perfectly for me, but otherwise I really thought this game held up pretty well. There are some traversing things that are a little annoying. I think I didn't mention this in gameplay, but definitely certain central gameplay mechanics are more about trying to master things than actual, like, to get through. For example, bouncing back and forth on walls shouldn't be something that you have to actually, like, really spend time learning. It should be a much easier thing, and that is not as easy initially as it should be.
It made me angry. Having to do that made me physically angry.
Because the thing is, you have to press X right before you.
Exactly.
And that timing is not always easy to pull.
Exactly.
Not only that, you have to point the stick in the direction that you jump.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you do.
You don't have to move the stick at all.
What?
It's just the button.
That's how it worked for me.
The stick has nothing to do with it.
Are you kidding me?
It's all a button timing.
Well then.
Mason's
Cool.
Mason's like, fuck, I gotta get rid of a whole page of notes.
I thought I figured this thing. I thought I had it all figured out.
You didn't.
And I got bamboozled.
Swindled.
It's not even a word, and I agree with it. I will also say, we didn't bring this up with gameplay. We can kind of bring it up here. Fuck the last 15 minutes.
Yes, and that goes with some of the difficulty spike of things, but also you don't have your sands of time, and they change the game mechanic at the end, and it's hard because you've spent the entire game using these mechanics, and you're suddenly not allowed to use them.
And again, is that cool narratively? Yeah, the prince has had this crutch for the whole game. He can't use it anymore. That is really damn cool narratively.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, it's a pain in the ass game.
In practice, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Same thing with, I don't know if you guys had this, but for me, Farah using her bow and arrow would sometimes hit me.
Yes.
And again, that's cool story-wise because she's never fired a bow and arrow in her life. So that makes sense. In gameplay-wise, I'm like, bitch, get a fucking scope!
Stop!
Yeah. And again, this game is a story-based game actually more than you realize until you play it. And so, like, there's things that are like, yeah, gameplay-wise, you're like, okay, that would not be developed today because it's annoying.
Yeah.
Is Farah as annoying as the president's daughter in Resident Evil 4?
I like
does
Ashley.
More. I also like Ashley. So, like,
I mean, she does more than Ashley. She's probably one of the best NPC escorts of all time because she's actually a very well-written character.
And she does help you with certain things, you know, and it's like, yeah,
Right.
you get shot by bow and arrow, but she does help you with them.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Plus, again, I like Ashley. So,
Wow.
But yeah, it's a game that has held up well in a way that I'm not going to say that none of the games have, because I think, honestly, weirdly, of the games that we've played that have held up the best, besides Street Fighter Cross Tekken, that have held up the best are consistently been the platformers at times.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
We've played a
That's
lot
fair.
of platformers that held up this year.
Yeah.
Again, I made the joke earlier, but Larry Boy is one of the ones
Larry
that
Boy's held up really well.
Like,
Like,
yeah.
I think, would we say that Looney Tunes Back in Action was the worst platformer?
I mean, yeah, but even then,
Yeah.
that's kind of a high
And
bar.
that wasn't an
that wasn't
awful
a
platformer.
god awful game.
It
Yeah.
had problems with the platforming that annoyed me, but it wasn't like I played much worse.
I was gonna say I never got as angry with the Looney Tunes Back in Action as I did with the last 15 minutes of Sands of Time.
Fair enough.
Genuinely, the last 15 minutes of Sands of Time made me.
They are it is frustrating.
I mean,
But that's also partially on me because I saved before I healed. So every time I went back, I didn't have any health. I would have to fight this horde of enemies, which again goes on too goddamn long, because at the halfway point, every enemy encounter goes on too long, in my opinion. And I would get my ass kicked because one hit and I'd be dead.
Yeah.
So that's
Thomas did the exact thing I did as a kid. So I know exactly what you're talking about. When I played this game the first time, I'd saved, and yes. So I 100% know what you did, Frog. And
again,
it's a frustrating thing, and it makes that last part harder than an already hard section.
And again, that is partially on me, so I can't judge the game entirely for that. But I'm a podcaster, so I'm gonna bitch.
But yeah, so it's a game that's held up well, which leads perfectly into the next question, because we can talk about something that is not canceled, but probably not happening. Does this game deserve a remake or a remastering in a modern setting?
So I was gonna ask if they ever have. I think you kind of basically already answered that.
They have. They obviously remastered it for the PS3.
Mm.
They put all the. Did they put all three or just two?
They put all three of them
All
together.
three. The whole trilogy was put on PlayStation 3
which
and
is
Xbox, I think.
I believe it was on Xbox. That's how I played it.
So yeah, it was remastered once, and
It was remastered.
Go ahead.
It was remastered, but not great because there were plenty. maybe it was just my copy, but there were plenty of times, like the big emotional moment where Farah dies, the entire cutscene was out of sync. So I'm like,
Ooh,
oh,
yikes.
well.
It's not the greatest remastering. It is just a straightforward, just kind of like they ported it over instead of like good remasters are spend a little bit of time and make sure the graphics and update things on it. But yeah, it's not awful. But yeah, there are definitely some things like, oh, so that's But they did remaster it once, and in 2019 they announced a Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake, a trailer, everything, and I pre-ordered it.
Oh.
Still have it pre-ordered, and it's not been in late 2020, I think, or mid 2020.
Yeah.
They're like, so yeah, it's gonna be delayed.
Yikes.
Till when? It's going to be delayed.
Delayed.
And
Till how long is it going to be delayed? Yes.
the reasoning that it sounds like it is because like they've had to rework everything back from the ground up.
Oh, that
so
sucks.
again, it may I've kind of resided to the fact that it may never come.
I think they refunded pre-orders.
They might have. I think they gave the option to, and I was like, not yet.
But they
I still have hope.
But they still didn't cancel.
Mm-hmm. And again, they were remaking it in the same way that the Insane trilogy and the Reignited trilogy were remade. It's a full remake, but it's not changing anything. It's just straight up updating the graphics, sort of thing.
And see, I was actually about to say, to answer the actual question, that's what I think they should do, is take a leaf out of the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro book, completely remake the first 3 games, packaged together on one disc or one cartridge if you're making a Switch version, and if that sells adequately enough, that can then lead into another Prince of Persia game in the same style.
Yeah, just a remake and just add lock-on and subtitles, and I will be happy, and maybe give Thomas a little bit better combat. Make it all the warrior within combat.
Look, I'd be happy with that. No one else would be, probably. But I'd be happy with it.
But yeah, that's what I think they should do. Just take a leaf out of the Spyro Crash playbook.
In the Warrior Within, you can do a stripper dance with a sword out and cut people's heads off. It's amazing.
No way.
They add Warrior Within combat, and they add more weapons to it and things like that.
Yeah.
Which is what then they led into Two Thrones with your different combat depending on which version of the Prince you are. Combat, I think Sands of Time and Warrior Within are better combat than Two Thrones, but none of the games have bad combat.
No. I mean, I'll be honest. I played the Wii version of Two Thrones. Baby.
Wow.
Oh, so let me correct it. There is a version that has bad combat.
Surprisingly, no waggle for the whip. Or, shit, I even get to the whip. I might have not played that game much, to be honest.
Yeah. By the time Two Thrones came out, I was kind of burned out on the franchise. Warrior Within really did a dent on it.
Yikes.
And again, it's kind of like, I like Sands of Time, the movie, and I don't hate Warrior Within, because I came in with the knowledge of this.
Mm-hmm.
So
that does change things. But yeah. So pretty much, if we do get a remake, it'll be because they actually do finish this game. But I would, in the meantime, wouldn't be opposed to a remaster, or even just a simple, throw it on the PlayStation Store, or the PS3 remasters on the PlayStation Store right now, or the Xbox remasters on Game Pass, so more people can kind of experience the game easier. Would be great.
I have had complaints, but this is still a fantastic game.
I mean, it had. I said it had averaging 9s. Like, this thing was huge. It won 3 or 4 game awards. It didn't. KOTOR won something like 12 game awards. So KOTOR was like deemed the game of the year that year. But
well, KOTOR also, to this day, is considered one of the best RPGs of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little hard to compare with.
It is, but it won more game awards than Vice City.
Wow.
It did.
Vice City, I think, only won 1 or 2. So.
Wow.
And as someone who doesn't like GTA, yeah, baby.
Vice City, though, I think Vice City won that year won G4's Game Awards. I think, if I remember right, it was the one that won that.
Okay.
I think I remember that.
Huh. Yeah, that does.
And that's why G4 doesn't exist anymore.
They made a mistake.
It all boils back to that.
Yeah, this is definitely a really good game. And I think audiences, if you have a PS2, PS3, Xbox, GameCube, Wii, go ahead, break out, find a copy.
If you have a phone from 2004,
don't play that version.
Yeah, don't play that version. Again, if you really want to play the Game Boy Advance version, play the Game Boy Advance version, but play the other versions. This is a game that deserves to always be replayed. It is a fantastic game. And I'm really glad that I picked it, and I forced you guys to experience it fully. Well, Thomas fully, Mason at least got a taste of it.
Yeah, it was. I'm glad you forced us to play this game. Actually,
this is the opposite of your first game of the season.
That's true. To go from Phantom Menace to
oh, that's right. That was your first one. Where did all the time go?
Keep in mind, Mason's first one was Go Vacation.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because we went Rise of the Imperfects, Interlude.
Oh yeah, Go Vacation, and then yours. That's right. I remember that now.
Why was Marvel Nemesis the best of those first three? That is very sad.
So hey, if you've been along for the ride here, thank you so much. As we have winding down season 1 here. This is our last episode of season 1. We're going to take a little bit of a hiatus, a couple of months, get a couple of things figured in line, and we'll be back with a whole other season of What the Bleep Are You Playing? So in that meantime, if you'd like to reach out to us, let us know what you think about this season, favorite episodes, something you would like to see us watch in the future, or just a disagreement with anything that we have said in any of these episodes.
There's probably a lot.
You can, just by emailing us at bleepyouplaying@gmail.com. That's bleepyouplaying@gmail.com.
You can tell Thomas how angry you are at him comparing Warrior Within to Shadow the Hedgehog.
Bitch, that was you.
No, that was you.
I know.
But yeah.
Trying to pin the blame here.
Thank you all for tuning in. We have very much enjoyed doing this show, and we're excited for more in the future. So
there's definitely gonna be.
So thank you guys very much, and we will catch you next time.
Get good, you slut!